California.
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 Hey guys, welcome to Suspenders of Belief. I'm Heavy.
And I'm Traby.
And today our Christmas discussion was Die Hard. Is it a Christmas movie?
Spoiler alert, I don't think so.
To be fair, I very much think it is a Christmas movie, and I know that it's always bugged you for years because it rides that coattails of like, oh, you're just being a contrarian and saying it's a Christmas movie. When it's like, no, but I genuinely think that Die Hard will kind of fall apart if you take away the Christmas elements. Like, it is the backbone of the story. So, in a nutshell, what the story is about is an estranged man flies out to see his wife and his kids for Christmas break. His wife has recently taken a new job out in California, is doing very well, and they're having a Christmas party. In the middle of this Christmas party, this group of terrorists show up and take a bunch of people hostage, and this police officer who is not only out of his district, he's out of his state. He's a New York cop in California who now has to deal with this situation and try to manage it.
It's very careful. And it's like we were talking about with Home Alone, was that a lot of the set pieces and everything are planned very specifically. And that's definitely the case here, because you have a lot of very explicit, like, he's only got 2 bullets in the gun. How is he going to solve this problem? Or like he has very limited resources or very limited areas that he can access without potentially getting killed himself. So a lot of it is very carefully planned and structured, and it's refreshing because it all feels very grounded. And I use the word visceral to sound really pretentious, but everything about it felt like real and grungy, and you've got real sets and you've got practical stunts. You know, there's a few composite shots here and there and stuff like that, but for the most part, it's a pretty grounded movie. And the locations are finite to the point where you become, as an audience member, you become kind of familiar with them. And you know, oh, this is that room where this happened, or that's that room where that happened. And it's very familiar, and it makes it feel like a real space instead of being just a set.
And that's one of those things where you definitely get the art from adversity from this film, because they were actually filming in the building you see. That's where they shoot. 90% of the movie takes place within those walls. And they were also really limited on what floors they could use, because a lot of the building was still under construction. So the floors that were like mostly done were allowed for them to be able to film on. And there were actually people like above and below them who were just working their 9-to-5 job while they're trying to do all their filming. It was really funny because they kept getting noise complaints because of all the action stuff that they were doing and making too much noise for people who are trying to work. And that's really funny to think about.
Yeah, it's what's the red letter media term? Shooting a rodeo. They use that natural aspect of the location to add a little degree of, I guess, realism to it. Mm-hmm. But no, it totally works. It all feels natural. It all feels, I guess that's a good word for it, rather than visceral, is natural. It feels naturalistic. Everything about it is pretty solid.
And the story does grow in a very organic sort of way. You have this person who knows how to use the training that he's had as a police officer, and how to listen in, how to use that CV radio, how to try to signal other response teams things to say. Because even then, when he initially gets a hold of a first responder, they're treating it like, it's just it's Christmas Eve, it's some kind of guy making a prank phone call, that kind of situation. And it's funny because he's so official about his response, like thinking about it from a civilian perspective. Of like, if I was on that CV radio, it'd be like, look, lady, the phone lines are cut. I can't even dial out. You need to send somebody now. Like the way that I would talk would be very different because he's trying to be much more official about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, as a dispatch person, you think that would stand out a little better. But again, if the movie was solved in 10 seconds, then it takes away from the fun of it. So it kind of has that things have to happen in a certain way. But one thing that I do love about the way that the villain specifically is written is that he's constantly one step ahead of not just John McClane, but like the police and then later the FBI as well. Like everything that they plan to use against him, he's completely planned for. And even when John McClane shows up and starts expediting their problems by having the police get involved earlier, it really doesn't affect his plan because he still needed them to be involved anyways. He's very thoughtful, very calculating, very meticulous about, who works in the building, because even that saves him whenever he has to pretend to be an employee of the building, knowing things like, how many locks the safe has and how to get past each one of those. Like it's this villain is not just like he mentions, I'm not just a regular thief, I'm an exceptional thief.
Yeah, very much of it is set up early on. A lot of it is built up. None of the solutions or the twists, if there are any, or any of the turns that the plot takes feel arbitrary. It all feels like it was set up early on and very carefully written and built up to that point. And that's I think probably its strength is that the setting and the very careful realism of every little bit, the setup of make a fist with your toes on the carpet, and he does that, and that's why he doesn't have shoes, and he tries to get shoes, and oh wait, they don't fit because that terrorist is shoe size, despite being a gargantuan man, his shoe size is really small and doesn't match. Little things like that are all built up so that every little detail is set up for something else for the most part. It's all very carefully done and very thoughtfully done, and it's something that anybody can respond to, whether they're watching for the first time today or they watched it when it was brand new. Like, it's something that sadly not every movie does. You would think it'd be a simple thing. Just think about your scripts. Just think about logically how this should progress, how this plot should be executed, how these characters would react in this situation, and it doesn't always happen. So when it's handled so well, you kind of respond to it, regardless of any other nitpicks you might have about it.
Well, that's what I like about the little character moments, is people feel like people. You have the one blonde brother who's doing something with the phone lines, and if you can almost feel like the older brother's just like, you're taking too long, and he comes by with a chainsaw and just cuts all the lines, and even makes like a little smirk over his shoulder as he walks past, and it's like, that's such a brother thing to do, like to criticize. You're taking too long, I'm gonna do it faster than you. And you have the Asian guy who's at the front door, and he's like taking position, he's got all his clips on the counter, he looks down and he sees like all the candy and display, and he like grabs a couple of Crunch bars to start snacking on, and it's just like little moments like that wasn't necessary, that didn't advance the plot, but it was just a person acting like a person.
Yeah.
And when you watch so many films where characters behave in ways that aren't rational, when you see genuine human emotions and actions, it's kind of fun and refreshing. And this movie is from 1988. Considering how old it is, it's kind of shocking how non-offensive some of the things are. I mean, we're talking about a group of terrorists invade a building in LA. And you remember the diversity of the group. You have some blonde European, you've got some like Eastern European, you've got an Asian, you've got a black guy. Like it's a pretty well spread group of people, like shockingly so. I think in the books they also had women terrorists, but it's just one of those things that jumps out to me as being really impressive.
Yeah, for the most part, I think that apart from the fact that they were explicitly German, you could write any of these characters as any kind of race or gender that you like, and it wouldn't necessarily take anything away from the movie. It'd be a little bit weird to have John McClane punch a lady in the face. That would be a little bit awkward. That wouldn't hold up as well. But for the most part, like, it's, yeah. And one of the things I like too, we were talking as well, like Theo, our African-American hacker friend, who's like one of the only characters that has any kind of like personality or levity to him, is totally necessary in that group of characters. But he actually doesn't die at the end, and it is kind of a reversal. Normally the black characters are the first to be killed off, because it's one of those weird cultural things where it's like, oh, these people that are non-white, they're disposable, let's just write them out. And it's not always a deliberate, like, racist point of the writer to do that. It's just more of a subconscious thing. And it's like, come on, guys, think about what you're saying, think about what you're doing. And they did that in this case, or at least, like, it just never came up. And it's just like, hey, that's kind of cool. That's actually pretty nifty.
So then I guess the reason we're all here, right? Is it a Christmas movie? And I think that's kind of the back and forth we've been having with these films, is whether or not a Christmas movie is a Christmas movie to you is going to come down to how it makes you feel. And I think that both as a logistic and a narrative perspective, this movie only works because it's Christmas, right? You have this big, huge corporate building with this skeleton crew that's there because it's at a Christmas party. You have this estranged relationship that are coming together because Christmas time is when you make those amends, when you try to have those olive branches, when you try to come together. The little things that kind of slip through, like the wife not being sure if he's coming into town because she's also busy like co-hosting this event and making sure things are going on, so she's kind of focused on that. Like, just little details that if it wasn't Christmas wouldn't quite work. I like the fact that it's such a big deal to cut power to the block in the middle of nighttime. Like they have to cut down the whole grid, which affects some 10,000 people in LA, and it's like, it's Christmas time, and so it's little things like that. Like to me, there are a lot of movies where you have Christmas as just kind of like a sprinkle on the cake, where you could completely remove it and it doesn't change anything. But I feel like too many elements of the film would have to be rewritten or tweaked in a way that the movie loses something. It's kind of like we talked about with Home Alone. Like, you could remove the home invasion aspect, just have about a kid who wishes away his family and then realizes that, he needs his family and he misses them. I feel kind of similar with this one, where if you take away the Christmas, it's still a great action movie, but it's not as good. You do lose something.
Yeah, to me, it's a subtle texture thing. It's not necessarily thematic or an emotional point to it whatsoever. Like, I think that you could cut the Christmas stuff out of it and you'd have to rewrite it, like it's part of the backbone of the plot. But I think you could cut out all the references to Christmas in this movie and it would function just fine. I think the Christmas stuff elevates it. It gives it just a little bit more character than it would have otherwise, sure. But it's not something that I think is vital to it. And that's why, to me, it's like, yeah, it's a fun movie. It's set during Christmas. It's obvious that they incorporated that into the story. And they have, Christmas music. They have characters singing Christmas songs to themselves. It functions really well, and it's a good balance of making it about something that takes place during Christmas and giving it that flavor without beating you over the head with it as well.
One element about this film that always stuck with me as being a particularly nice aspect about it being a Christmas film is a lot of times when you're watching Christmas movies, everything's happy all the time. It's everything goes right and everything works out and everything's, nice and glossy. And it's one of those things like, life kind of sucks sometimes. Sometimes things don't always go right. Sometimes you don't always ride off into the sunset with the girl, which ironically, you do get that happy moment at the end of this movie. But it's like, he earns it. It's not expected that at any point he is going to make it through this film, because he gets broken down physically. He gets broken down mentally. He falls apart emotionally. There's this really great scene where he's talking to Al on the radio, and you can tell that the character does not think he's making it out of this alive. He's basically given up because he's saying, when you get a chance and you find out who my wife is, tell her I'm sorry. I was never able to tell her. I told her I loved her, but I wasn't supportive enough and I wasn't a good enough husband. Please just let her know how sorry I am about that. And it's one of those, like, it's heartbreaking because you can feel that this character has essentially given up. He does not think he's going to survive this, and he's hurt. He's exhausted. It's such a genuine moment. It really feels like we're seeing into this person's soul, because you wouldn't get a movement like that in Commando, or Rambo, where it's like, no, you don't get vulnerability. You don't get your hero swelling up with tears thinking about the mistakes that they've made. And so there's so much raw emotion in this film. It is a great action movie, but at its backbone, that main character, he's really just trying to do his job. He's just trying to do the right thing. And, he's only there because he was trying to reconnect that relationship with his wife and to see his kids. So at the end of the day, I think that's why fundamentally this does need to be a Christmas movie, because it is about rekindling that estranged relationship, and it is about, bringing your family together, and in a way that doesn't feel schmaltzy, and it doesn't feel too Hollywood. It doesn't feel too forced.
I would argue that him reconnecting with his family is definitely a big element of this movie, but I wouldn't say that's what it's about. He has an arc, quote unquote. At the beginning of the movie, he's estranged with his wife. The situation's tense. He's made the effort to come down to California to be with her, and they're all playing it kind of coy. They're not sure if he's going to go home with them or not. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to go home and sleep with her, because, they're making up the spare room. But there's, a bit of tension there. To me, it seems like an obvious choice. Well, of course, spend Christmas with your kids at the very least, but there's a certain level of uncertainty there. But anyway, long story short, there's tension, and then action movie happens, and then at the end he's all like, I'm sorry. There's never a point where it feels like he has an epiphany about their relationship or anything really changes. It's almost more like, because of this crazy situation I'm in, I'm able to see what's more important than my own pride about your success, and I'm willing to make a concession. That's really basically it, and that's great.
I think that's that scene where he's talking to Al. That is that change of character moment where he does kind of break down and stop thinking so highly of himself and really thinking about what he cares about. Now, of course, this is going to be completely undermined in the sequels as they fall back into the estranged relationship. Though, to be fair, Die Hard with a Vengeance is a great movie. So again, we're not always going to agree, and that's all right. I still think that Die Hard is one of my favorite films, regardless of whether or not it makes you think about Christmas. It's still a fantastic film, and if you haven't seen it, it's worth checking out. What's next on our Is It a Christmas Movie?
I'd like to go back to one of my childhood favorites that honestly used to terrify the crap out of me, like genuinely horrifying, and that's a little Christmas movie called Gremlins.
Hey, well, to be fair, I watched Jaws before I had any concept of what blood was, so don't apologize too much. So anyways, guys, next time on Suspenders of Belief, Gremlins. Is it a Christmas movie?